Hey guys, thanks for joining us again this week as we look at our devotional from 1 Kings chapter 8 and chapter 9. Just a couple of announcements for you. Don't forget that today at 3 o'clock on Instagram only, we have our conversation with Pastor David Gusick. I'd love for you guys to be a part of the conversation. The way that you can be is by bringing your questions to the conversation, posting them there on the video itself, and if we're able, we'll get to the questions. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions that they want to bring, because David Gusick is just an incredible mind. He's the guy who's got the free commentary available both on Blue Letter Bible as well as on his own website, which is enduringword.com. So please be sure to check it out. You're not going to want to miss this episode of Conversations. And then after that, on Sunday, remember that we have our Ironman, where we're meeting digitally through Zoom. We're going to have a trivia night, a little devotional. Just going to be a great time of fellowship. We'd love for all the guys of the church to participate. We have a link in this video to it. You can contact us if you have our personal information, or if you'd like, you can email will@reachjacks.com. We'd love for you and even family members of yours to get involved in this Ironman. It should be a lot of fun, but again, it's our men's ministry, so it is for guys only, although I know some of you guys are going to use your wives to help you in the trivia, but that is cheating. I'm sorry. Anyways, on to our Devo today. We're going to be looking at, again, 1 Kings chapter 8 and chapter 9. Now, chapter 8 is just all about the temple. We see that the tabernacle in the first part is brought into, the Ark of the Covenant from the tabernacle is brought into the temple. And then from there we see, and we're going to come back and talk mainly on that. But then we see the speech after the temple is done. We see Solomon dedicates the temple to the Lord. Later on in the chapter, he blesses the people who have gathered together for the temple dedication. And then Solomon ultimately dedicates the temple. Right on the heels of him dedicating the temple, right on the heels of him being obedient to the Lord, doing the work that God had called him to do, God shows up and talks to Solomon, it says, a second time. And in there, he warns him. He tells him, if you follow me, I'm going to be with you. And if you don't follow me, then the people are going to be in bondage to other people in the surrounding nations. Then later, Solomon and Hiram, who's a friend of Solomon, Solomon is paying Hiram back for all the work that he had done. Hiram had provided gold, he had provided wood, he provided workers for Solomon. And we see here that Solomon gets into a little bit of a sticky spot financially, because he asks Hiram to build not just the temple, but all of Solomon's buildings, including his own personal palace, which took twice as long to build as the temple itself. And Hiram then says, all right, it's time for my payment. And so Solomon doesn't have the means to pay him, so he offers him 20 cities. Now understand, those cities don't belong to Solomon. They belong to the Lord. And so for Solomon to give up the 20 cities, we see that Solomon is essentially getting in a debt that he can't repay. And it's just a really good warning to us not to, especially for the sake of our own houses, right? Not to get into a debt when we can't pay it off, because the end of it is just a sticky spot. Now, granted, they're friends, and Hiram ends up, it seems like, is okay in the end of it, but Solomon gets into a debt that he can't pay. And so he says, here you go, Hiram, here's 20 cities. And Hiram goes and looks at those cities, and he is not satisfied at all. So Solomon uses currency that he doesn't have, right? It's just a form of debt, kind of like credit. And then from there, Hiram isn't even pleased with it. So what a warning to us not to get into a financial sticky spot, especially if it's just to upgrade our house, which is essentially what Solomon was doing. And then from there, we see just a list of other achievements that Solomon used the people in the surrounding towns, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and the surrounding nations, not towns, sorry, to become their servants, to do the grunt work for the children of Israel. And then tomorrow we're going to see when the Queen of Sheba comes and praises Solomon's great wisdom and all that. Just all this section is about Solomon's achievements. But let's take a step back and let's look at in chapter 8 when the Ark of the Covenant is brought into the temple. The reason I want to focus on that is because this is a monumental occasion for the children of God. And I said that very specifically. It's monumental for the church as well as for the children of Israel. So up until this point, the children of Israel had been a wandering group. And so the Ark of the Covenant has poles on it to make it something that they could easily transport. And now the Ark of the Covenant is being brought into its permanent home. And the poles don't leave. It's a way to remind the people of God's provision, God's protection during their wandering days. But we see the Ark of the Covenant goes from the tabernacle, which was the tent that Moses had set up, that was to move from campsite to campsite to campsite. It moved from the tabernacle then now into the temple, into its permanent location. So it's this huge transition of God's presence, right? The temple now is God's building because his presence is there. Well, then as we transition into the New Testament, Solomon's temple will have been done away with, a new temple will have been erected, and now Jesus, at the crucifixion, we see that the veil in that temple is torn, and now there's another transition of essentially the Ark of the Covenant. There's another transition of God's presence, and that now is into the life of the believers. 1 Corinthians speaks about that we now are the temple of the Holy Spirit, that we have been bought with a price, and we are not our own. So these transitions are very, very monumental. We see going from wandering with his people to a permanent location, and now the presence of God is inside of each one of us who believes in the Lord, that we now are essentially a combination of the tabernacle, as we are obviously mobile and we move, but then we're also the temple as God's presence is permanently within us. So it's just a monumental chapter, or at least section in this chapter that I wanted to highlight when it comes to our personal relationship with Jesus. All right, guys, I hope that you are blessed by our reading, and be sure to keep up. Again, we do these Devos every Tuesday through Friday, and then we give the weekend a break. But that doesn't mean that you should give the reading a break. Be sure to prioritize this time. I know that there are difficult chapters to get through. Chapter 8 is long, and it's a lot of just kind of details, a lot of warnings. If you follow God, then you're going to be blessed, and if you don't follow God, then you're going to end up living in a life of defeat. It's a great lesson for us. Follow the Lord, it's a life of victory. Don't follow the Lord, it's a life of defeat. But we know that there's a lot of repetitive things that come up, especially in the book of 1st and 2nd Kings. But I want to encourage you to be faithful in your reading. As you give the Lord opportunity to speak to you, I know he will speak to you, because James tells us that if we draw near to God, then he will, not he might, he will draw near to us. So prioritize your reading, prioritize your prayer time, prioritize Christian fellowship, and just be in the Word as much as you possibly can. All right, guys, God bless you. See you again on Instagram at 3, and then later on any of our social media outlets at 6:30 for our service tonight. God bless you guys.